after I made the video to share the amazing, wonderful things that the Lord Himself has done for Brian since he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, particularly in that video, I just picked up with the surgery that was on Tuesday, March 31st. But after I've done that, I'm just sitting here rolling over in my mind all the many more things that God did for him, for us, for our family, really from the time Brian became sick. And I just feel like there's so much good in that that I wanted to share it too, in case it also helps someone. I know as we've gone through this, we spent a great deal of time talking to one another about the different things that we knew from testimony that other people had gone through and how the Lord had helped them. And many times that was amidst impossible circumstances. But God came through and God was there and they weren't alone. And that was really helpful to us to have heard that and kind of know the details of their story. So, Brian got sick in October. He became very sick very fast. We took him over to the emergency room at Marshall North on a Sunday after he became sick on a Friday night. It was the middle of October. And they ran all kind of tests. They're sending, blood out to like Vanderbilt and different places trying to get answers. And so in the meantime, they release us from the hospital and let us come home with Brian so he can, get a little better rest. And during that time, we got to go to church at Rocky Branch. And at that service, Brother Levon Stone was visiting. And he had gotten up and taken the Bible and was about to, deliver a message and talk to the congregation. And I remember how he suddenly changed course. He'd already started to just begin to talk. He kind of greeted the crowd. And then he just stopped and turned, real meek and humble the way that he always is. Went towards our book stand, asked the brothers that were standing up there near it where we kept our oil, took it, went directly to Brian, and anointed him. And I'm sitting back there watching that take place, and I'm just like, thank you, Lord, because he was very sick, and we did not know what was wrong with him. We didn't have a diagnosis at this time. We only knew that he was sick. After Brother Levon anointed him, he just, again, very meek and humbly went back to giving his message to the church, and we went on. Church was over. We get in the vehicle to go home. I'm driving. Brian, again, didn't feel well. And Brian's sitting over there beside me in the vehicle, and he said, "Did you feel that when Brother Levon came over to anoint me?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I did. It was great, and I'm so thankful." And he said, "No, I felt the Lord. I did, but," he said, "Kim, I felt something I've never felt before." And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" And Brian put his hand about here, about the center of his abdomen, in a fist like that. And he said, when Brother Levon's hands went on me, he said, "I felt something inside there just twist." I've never had that experience, I'm privileged and so grateful that I have felt the power of God. And, that's what changed my life. And I felt that when someone's hands have gone on me and when I've been anointed, but I didn't have an experience of feeling anything twist or turn inside my body, and so I didn't really know what to say, but I told Brian, I said, the Lord knows, and as long as He knows, and we know He's sending you help, then we're just going to hold on to that. And Brian said, yeah, I'm thankful. And we didn't really know, we had no idea how significant that would become. So, as many things in our life have been, and I've heard so with so many other people, things get worse sometimes, oftentimes, before they get better. And that happened with Brian. He got more sick. We end up back at a hospital. They put a stent in to open up a bile duct that they had determined from some of their scans and testing was closed off. And that had been what a tremendous amount of built up bile and toxins was what had made Brian so very sick. And so they were going to go in there. They had explained to us it was somewhat exploratory. They had full intentions of opening up that bile duct. They weren't really sure why it was closed off. So they went in to do that, and when they got in there and came out and gave us the report was that there was a tumor on the bile duct, and that's what had closed it off. So that was the first time that we heard tumor and cancer, and that began that part of the journey. You know us, and this is only intended for our friends and family, church family, so trusting that you do. You know that, we lost Brian's dad to bone cancer. My dad had died first in his mid-50s, Papa Wayne, 52, 53. My mom, we lost a few years later in her mid-50s to breast cancer. So, nobody wants to hear cancer. Everyone in the world's afraid of that. I don't know a person who hasn't had some experience in their family or themselves with cancer. And so, it's going to be like present time COVID-19. I mean, it's just a scary, scary thing. But we had to go forward, and we knew immediately that we of course would need God's help, and wouldn't have considered, trying to navigate through it without it. But that, just doing what we do for us is just nature trying to help ourselves. We continued to go to whatever, doctors and oncologists we were referred to get whatever help they could provide with what they had learned in their lives. But all the while, we were getting the word out of what we had been told and depending on God to make a difference and to come through for us. And as we go forward, another week or so passes, that stent that had been put in failed. We had came down here to Grandview to meet with Dr. Thompson for the first time. He's a cancer surgeon, and we were going to talk to him and try to find out if we wanted to seek treatment here with him, or would we go somewhere like MD Anderson or Vanderbilt or whatever. You just want to get the best that you can from those kind of resources while you're waiting on the Lord. And that was our thought process. But just like over the years as we were hoping and praying for our children, all the while there was never any question in our mind that our real help would come from the Lord, and just whatever His will was what we wanted, recognizing that His will might not be ours, but you always hope that they meet up, and that He can see fit to grant you what you're asking for. We get down here to see Dr. Thompson, and it just so happened that this was about 2 weeks after that first stent had been put in. And what we didn't know was that it was not put in the proper place. It was failing. The duct was closed off again. More bile and toxins had built up, and Brian was again getting very sick very quickly. So when Dr. Thompson sees him, he tells us right off, we're not going to spend time talking about chemo and the Whipple surgery and kind of a treatment plan for Mr. Fortner. He's too sick for that. I'm going to put him in the hospital, and we're going to find out what's wrong. We're going to get him better, and then we'll talk more. So things changed very quickly. We went along with that. It seemed that Brian and I appreciated so greatly that instead of just going through a motion or a routine, hey, they're here for a consultation, I'll tell them what they want to know, I'll answer their questions, maybe the guy will get some help. He was very human and caring in the situation, very quick to say, I know what you think you're here to do, but I don't think you know how sick he is, and I can see it. And it could be critical. And he was right. We let him admit Brian into Grandview, first time there. They found out that that's what had happened with the bile duct. It had to, the bile duct and the stent that had been put in to open it, that had to be changed out and a new one put in. And during that procedure, they told us that it was pancreatic cancer, which in our experience is as bad as it gets. What we have said to each other at home before this ever happened to us, you could see something on TV or get a phone call about, someone's husband, brother, cousin who'd gotten sick and died. Oh my goodness, what was wrong with them? Pancreatic cancer. And what we associated it with and would say at our house was, if you ever hear that you've got pancreatic cancer, you should start planning your funeral, because you won't have long. And so it's really hard to admit, and we don't say that now, but that'll give you the best idea, quickest way I know how, of where we were and what we were facing with Brian. And so after they kind of got Brian situated with the stents at that time, they moved quickly forward to tell us that the treatment plan was 3 months of chemotherapy, then he would need the Whipple surgery and another 3 months of chemo. So we began to go through the process of chemo. Of course, at the very, very beginning, at the very beginning of chemo, the first step, that's what I was trying to say, is to educate us on what to expect. Brian was to receive the 3 most toxic chemo drugs on the market. That was their words. He would get them all at the same time, and with that one he would also get a 4th drug, is how they would refer to it. But they went on to explain that the drug was really a cocktail of medicine that was vitamins and nutrients and steroids and things to help combat the horrific side effects of the 3 chemotoxins that he would be getting all at the same time. They gave us a stack of paperwork for each of those drugs that listed all of the side effects. And there were hundreds, I guess, for each one. Very daunting. The things I'll say normal, it's not normal, but it's normal for chemo patients. Hair loss, weight loss, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, but then a great deal of other side effects that when you have any combination of those at the same time would make for an extremely sick person. Brian begins to go through his chemo. The steps for that, the process for that, we learned was he'd come into the clinic, he'd go to the lab, they'd take blood, they would weigh him, they'd get the report from his blood, and then he would see the oncologist and a resident training with the oncologist. And what I wanted to tell you in this video is how that time after time after time, when Brian went to chemo, their words, not ours, were that he was a poster child for what they wanted a chemo patient to be able to experience. He gained weight instead of losing it. His color was good. He had side effects. He had gotten sick, but it was nothing like what they told us to expect. And they couldn't believe that. One of them referred to him as a superstar patient and how they hoped everyone could have that experience. But it just didn't happen, and they never got to see that. But that's what the Lord did for Brian during his treatment.